Hello and welcome to episode 24 of the Rogue Health Economist. It is Trauma Week here at the Rogue Health Economist. We took a break yesterday in respect for Blackout Tuesday, but we are back here today talking about what might be the most important topic in the world right now. And I'm super excited to have here today as a special guest all the way from Norway, Alanya Forsberg, who has been a leader in the field of trauma. She's a psychotherapist. She's been working with leaders and groups, and has been in the business of supporting personal transformation. So great to have you here. Thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
So let's jump into it straight away and just talk about trauma. I mean, I think we have to just start with acknowledging we are recording here on June the 3rd, 2020. It may be the most traumatic moment for human consciousness in the last few years, certainly with riots all over the world and sort of like a deep moment of not really sure what to call this, but we've just been inside for 3 months with COVID, and now as people come out, feeling a lot of anger, frustration, with lots of different underpinnings. So why don't we just start with your take on where we are right now and what as a sort of a grounding into the conversation.
Yeah, first of all, my heart goes out to all of you that are touched by this and has been touched by this for decades. The way and the poorly way that we've treated people. And so, yeah, I'm in Norway, but I'm deeply moved by what is happening. And it's not for me a new thing. It's like being in this business of development and working with people and their traumas. I've seen this a lot. And of course, any abuse, any power misuse is stopping us as humanity to get into line with each other, to get into heart-to-heart connection, to be solid in our own lines on the inside of ourselves also. So what I'm experiencing is like I'm seeing the like Mother Earth can't hold anymore. Like she's really pushing every shadow up. So we'll have to see it, we'll have to face it, and we'll have to meet it. And this is my daily work, to meet that. And yeah, there's just a longing in me for humanity, for us to wake up. And I think I want to use one of my own personal experiences, how I woke up to that responsibility in me. So this is a long time ago. I was standing in a queue, in a line in a foreign country, I think it was Switzerland. And there was a mother that was about like maybe 5 meters away from me, and there was a lot of people in between, but I saw her, she hit her child. And I found all the reasons not to respond in that moment, and I didn't. And I've regretted not responding with my ability to respond since then. And that was my awakening to, shit, I have a responsibility when I see this to actually stand up for the child and make sure that the child is protected and that this is known. So this is the challenge we're in, all of us, all the time, when energies are out of line. And I really hope for us to wake up how to actually meet the traumas and the fight and the abuse and the perpetrator and situation that is all over. And I also think this is very deeply ingrained in our faith. And so I would love to get into that at some point in this talk.
Yeah, let's just start right there. So I know you have a sort of particular thesis for what you think trauma is, or how you describe what it is and what causes it. And why don't we just start there?
Well, anything in your life that make you shrink and to hold a contracted energy in your body system, I would define as a trauma. So normally, if we talk within within physical trauma, doctors, how that would be a physical broken leg or something like that, that's being called a trauma. As a psychotherapist, I also see that wound on the inside is in the emotions or in the experience of myself as a human being. So if I have been traumatized, there is something in me that is not responding healthy to what's happening to me in my life. And very often, and where I work the most, where my methodology works, is on pre-verbal traumas, all the traumas that we actually don't have a cognition or a capacity to know or understand in our heads. It's still in our bodies. And so if you're born with the umbilical cord around your neck, in my work, that would come forward and you will come maybe into horror or panic, and you don't have no clue where this is coming from. But that horror is so ingrained in your body system that you will be afraid of anything that reminds you or your body about the trauma when you are going to be birthed. So in this, we can see these pre-verbal traumas are actually, in a very large degree, being the stoppers of your energy flow in your life. Like if you weren't met when you reached out your hand to your parents for the first time, that wasn't met. Very likely that will become an energy in you saying, like, I'm not seen, I can't reach out, no one will meet me, no one loves me. And maybe be the problem that you seek help for because you can't hold on to a relationship when you're old. So these things, they just becomes on top of everything. And then at some point in your life, that energy might hold you so much back that you find out, okay, I really need to work this out, whatever it is.
Absolutely. When you look at what we're seeing in the world right now, what do you see as the sort of core traumas of humanity that are being played out on the streets or in riots and those kind of things?
So if you hold an energy down, at some point, either that energy will go down or it will fight its way back, you know? And so we can look upon these from systems, we can look upon it from politicians, we can look upon it on so many angles, but in the bottom line, it all comes down to how you feel as a human being. If you feel suppressed, if you feel unjustly treated, like that is an energy that is holding your energy down at some point. And this is where we're at in this moment. This is rising. Enough is enough. It also correlates very deeply to our core wound as humanity, the separation. And I've been playing around with a lot of thoughts lately. Like, I've been working on the highest level of security that we have in Norwegian psychiatry. That means working with the murderers, the people that violate. And you know, the most shocking thing is that in that ward, you wouldn't see much feelings. But if there was a new killing, they would ask to be put into their own rooms to be sheltered. So there is something about disconnection. If I have been abused, and the way for me to survive is to fight back in a fight response, that will help me not feel my own trauma of being violated as a child. So, and also this goes into the economy. I'm sorry, I'm so eager on this, because the traumas that we are creating with violence, the perpetrator that creates the victims, we need to put more effort into stopping the perpetrators and to teach humans how to do that instead of using millions of dollars on treating the victims of the abuser. So if my heart should go anywhere out, it would be to really raise the awareness in the world of how to stop the abuse and the abuser. The difficulty is when the abuser is also the savior, then the person it's in connection with only have one more way to respond, and that is being the victim. And this is also where we see very much in the Christian supremacy and any church that offers salvation for your sin and at the same time tells you you're not valid enough in some or any kind of way. So there's so much to this, but if there should be a heartbeat from me, is like, how can we as people working in the health system help the people that are in front of us to wake up to the fact that if this is what you are experiencing, you're actually in an abusive relationship. Mm. And if this is happening, it's also abusive. Like if we just wake up those eyes there, right there, yeah. and then finding the keys of how to meet that. And in my trainings, I actually find people to find their own power, like their full, also physical power. Because if you really know how powerful you are, you don't need your power. You don't need to dominate anyone. Yeah. You can actually use your sword right forward, and that would be an opening instead of a war.
Yeah, I think there's so many incredible crossovers to what you're saying here, because, you know, in the world of functional medicine that I found myself in for the last 15 years, you know, you see that there's a root cause of chronic illness that is in the environment, right? Whether that be toxicity or food or stress or all these other things or trauma. And ultimately, we're all being in the business in trying to unwind those things. Ultimately, the real solution is changing the environment so that this isn't constantly happening, because it's way more expensive to solve the problem, you know, at this late end. And if we want to get to the root cause, we end up doing things like empowering people to participate, empowering people to understand their own power, because ultimately that's not just such the elegant solution, but it's actually the most cost effective, and it's really the only long-term solution. So I think we're seeing the problem the same, and actually a lot of the solutions, it sounds like you've done with empowering leaders and empowering individuals is the same on there too. For people who are now experiencing it and realizing that they are, you know, that they have trauma, what are sort of like the foundations of solutions for unwinding the problem in stage one, should we say?
First of all, become curious about what is your response to your life situation. Are there arenas where you're in connection with other people where you freeze, you lose your speech, you become numb, or you want to run, or you want to fight? Get to understand your own survival kit. Like some of us, like me growing up having a very aggressive father that would have a very high voice, the way for me to escape that was to become silent and numb and not respond at all. And so, and any kind of responding physically would be dangerous. So my learning in that, my way to survive was to become silent. And then in a way, my revenge was to become the helper and seeking out everyone else needing help. And of course, that also from my own survival. So get where what is happening to you in connections that you feel dangerous or frightening or giving you some kind of fear. How is your body responding? And from that, if you know that you're numb or you can't speak, then it's very likely that you have a trauma from a very young age. This is why it's called pre-verbal, because you don't actually have anything to come with. You don't have a language and you don't have cognition. You're just afraid. And the way that a very little child can get out of a dangerous situation is to be numb, like the animals, right? So, but you can also later on, or you can have I'm sure you've met people that are just angry. They're just like, and it's very simple language, like, you stupid, I don't like you, even if it is about something that you wouldn't even consider as dangerous, but this person does. And so it will come into the fight trauma. And we use very often language of a very little child, because when you come into a reaction mode in your fight trauma, very often your limbic system does block out, and you don't have the capacity you normally have in your own cognition. So sentences will be very often like childish, and very projectively, like you are, and this is the way to survive. Underneath every fight trauma, there is a very wounded child that is afraid. So to understand where to begin for yourself, you need to find out, what am I afraid? What is my fear? What is this fight trauma in me fighting for? Well, very often it's fighting for my life, but I don't have the cognition of that. I'm just after the fight, like, oh my God, did I really say that? Sorry, like, really? So this is the trauma reacting. And to get to the point, next time you want to you do get it like a zzz in your body when your trauma is being activated, get to learn when these zzz comes, and then you do have a choice. If you have a fight trauma, get away until you can stand in your own power again. If you have a flight trauma, then fly if you need to. But it's like, if this is happening between two people and then this is happening, this person either go fight back, or it goes numb or freeze or run. So first of all, get to know which one of these are activated in you and when, and then start really to be curious about what happens with me then, and get the script. Which sentences are running in my head as this is happening? Very often this is scripts like, no one likes me, I'm hated, I don't have any self-worth, there is no point for me to try to do anything, just you wait. And so the scripts, get them and start challenging your own scripts. Is it really true that no one loves me?
Yeah.
For the little child in trauma, that is the truth.
Totally. You know, one of the things I'm interested in is it takes a certain amount of self-awareness and self-discovery to be able to participate in that process by yourself. It seems to me that most people come into trauma in relation to someone else, and maybe the first steps in helping people unwind that has to come in relation to someone else too, to give them the sort of surround and support to be able to sort of identify that and realize what's going on. Because in the example that you just gave, in that moment where you're angry or you shrink away, there's a lot going on internally, and it's hard to sort of compartmentalize it and go, oh, I'm having these feelings and this is what happened.
This is the thing, you can't, but you can learn this zit. There is an activation. And so when you have in a way understood, okay, I have a fight trauma. So me and my husband, like, he is a clear, like, numb, the way he survives. And if I'm a woman that has a fight trauma, we will end up in this very often, right? So, and the woman would be desperate because it doesn't get any resistance, doesn't get anything. I can't even overpower a person that is down, right? So that becomes confusing, but then I can understand, okay, so I have a fight trauma. So next time, and I can make my husband aware, like, hey, I think you have a freeze or numb, right? And so if a couple is becoming aware of that, next time this is happening, then if you can't stop it, right after, like, then reconnect and say, okay, so I went into my fight trauma and you went into your numb. Can we try to meet this in balance again? And practice. This is possible. It's not that difficult to really heal the trauma, because every trauma is created in relation. It needs to happen to heal in relation. That is the part that is difficult to do on your own. But to come aware, to start to track it, to really find what your traumas are about and be in that curiosity, that's something that everyone can do. And also with help from friends.
Yeah, let's talk about who can play that role, because obviously health professionals, psychotherapists, right, have stood in that role for a number of years, and obviously there's been a sort of a push towards the professionalization of that support. But traditionally, you know, you would have had maybe peers or elders in a community, you know, play that kind of role. And in my last book, The Community Cure, I really talked about how this sort of, you know, the death of community has led to like the professionalization of some of these services. And I'm really interested in in understanding as an economist, how can we use the least costly, least invasive interventions first? And I love peer-to-peer delivery, and I love groups because of the just sort of inbuilt efficiencies of it. So I'd love to get your thoughts as to like, how can we use friends, how can we use groups, and how should we use professionals, and in what order?
Well, I think there's a lot we can do on our own, and there's a lot we can do with being honest in our relationships. Like when before, um, most kids would have a grandmother's lap to run into and cry out in. So the lap is gone, the grandmother is gone, but it's absolutely possible to say to your friend, "Hey, I actually just need to be held, nothing more. Don't take anything from me, don't give anything to me, but I just need to be held, to be able to go and explore inside of myself." There's so much that we can use each other to, like to be at service for each other.
Mm.
The difficulty is if like the nervous system of the person you're asking to hold you is highly vibrating and activated, then you won't get any rest, you know? So you'll have to ask a person that you feel is calm so that you can calm down into their nervous system. And actually, there isn't many grown-ups, but this should be the quality of people that are grown-ups in the world today. But there are many of them. So be bold, ask for what you need, and also this is my challenge also to psychotherapists, because very often if you work on one-to-one and you work with language, it's really difficult to really meet and heal the physiological problem of a pre-verbal trauma, because that's in the body. Like in my retreat, it can happen that I'm holding a person for 4 hours for this one human being to come down to, for once in his life, maybe the first time after birth, to feel that his nervous system is calming down and not be activated in trauma response. So these things are delicate. It needs a very, very large safety. And the person that's holding, of course, needs to know what's happening and how to follow this person to this wounded part. And so there's for these parts, there should be professionals there. And then I'm saying again, there is not many professionals that can hold that if you're not in embodiment work, like using your body as a tool in the healing.
Yeah, let's get into the body function of it, because there's a lot of phrases like the issues in the tissues, and your biography becomes your biology. Those kind of concepts of how the body sort of stores trauma, and then as a result, complex chronic illness comes as a result of that. And how do you? What are there some strategies that you found for people to be able to start to release these kind of things with like physical work or physical modalities?
Well, first of all, become curious. Like that's one of the most healing forces that we have, that you stay curious. It is when you become, what is that called in English? When it doesn't matter. Like, there's an English word that I'm looking for.
Yeah, I know the word you're thinking of, but I can't pull it out of my head.
Well,
Equanimity?
I don't know that word, but okay. So when you, oh my God, when you are not taking action either for or against, you're just like going with it. Like you do know that you have pain in your shoulder, but you just, nah, it's just a shoulder pain, and you don't pay attention to the shoulder might have something with you constantly psychologically going over, feeling bad guilt for not doing what you should do for your parents, for your sick sister, your sick children, or whatever. It's like you're not bringing awareness to what is emerging in your own body. So one of the most important things is to become curious, like what is happening on this inside here? How am I breathing? How far down am I breathing? Because if I'm breathing here, I'm actually not giving the nourishment that my body actually needs from moment to moment. And if in 90% of the people I talk to, every time I talk with another human being, I stop breathing. or I go into fear. Like, start become really curious, because if you are living in fear, you're creating illness. Yeah, you're so there's so much to learn about self-love. There's so much to learn about self-care. And then that is also the collective wound that we have, that we actually don't care for ourselves or for others. And that's the biggest sickness there is in this planet today. The lack of compassion, the lack of responsibility, ability to respond.
Where does that come from? Where does that arise from?
Because we think we need to fight to survive. That we're utterly alone. And if I don't fight for me, no one else will. And so this is so ingrained in ourselves. Like, if I should bring you, this is how we believe as human beings. If I should bring you a plate with a soup and then another plate with a soup, one soup is dark and black and one soup is white. Your brain would immediately think that the dark one is bad. You wouldn't even have a cognitive, well-thinking thing about that. It's so deeply in our system that there's always a duality choice, that either is good or bad. Right? Yeah. So with that duality, is like, if you think about the origin of you as a human being, it's a semen and an egg. It's two parts, and they're equally as important for the creation of you. So as long as we're dividing reality into bad and good and the other and me, we don't get to the place where we're in line and feeling heart connection to others, because we are protecting ourselves and wanting to survive.
Super interesting. Just to, I guess, bring it back to a concept that we've been talking about for the last month, is, you know, this idea of this virus that lives out there, that's out and is, you know, is dangerous. And some of the conversations that we've had on this podcast have really been thinking about, you know, given what percentage of our human body is actually microbial and viral and all those kind of things, that, you know, ultimately, you know, the fear of the virus plays a role in the physiology of what degree to which we're affected by the virus. And ultimately, like, people who are healthy and people who are healthy aren't affected, and then people who are, you know, clear are in generally not affected. Obviously there's age related things with that, but it does certainly seem that, you know, if there is a range of effects in different humans with the same stressor, and that range can be understood as like our internal function, and if fear, you know, reduces that internal function, you can actually see through that lens the degree to which you know, fear of the microbe actually is a self-fulfilling prophecy for many people.
Yes, but it is the same thing. Like, the unconscious part of us is unconscious, and it is the unknown or unknown that we fear. And when a virus comes and it feels unknown, and we don't have the control that we usually have for viruses, like, take this treatment and then you're done. And so it taps into a much deeper wound than normal flu or normal things that are happening, and so many more people are affected. And then we can just shake our shoulders and you say, well, it won't affect me because my lungs are fine and I'm not in an elderly home. I think I want to be cautious about saying that psychology, of course, fear, it's what I usually say is, like, if you experience fear, it's a divine calling for you to act. Either meet it or get away. But if you're standing still, the fear will take you, right? So I'm seeing how differently people are responding to getting COVID, and how different strategy of how to cope with fear they have. Someone is just completely isolating. Others are saying like, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to get this shit. And if I'm going to die, I want to do it quick. So I don't need to live in fear. I don't know if this answers your question, but there's something about our psyche that is so afraid of dying that we almost have forgotten that like life is birth and death, and that is the force of the dark. And there's something about what is happening now where everything of darkness is coming up in the world. We'll have to face it. We'll have to meet this, right? And our own shadows and our own collective shadows. And so the way to come forward, I'm sure we will have much more of COVID-19 coming. And so we're all trying to prepare, like next time, what if it is everyone that has blue eyes that will be affected? Yeah, then what? And so us as humanity working on fear, us as health workers working on fear, is actually to meet the fear in the human being. Then there's nothing more we can do, but we can meet that. Maybe that can prevent, maybe we cannot, but it's all down to the connection, down to the meeting of what is alive on the inside in this human being. And so this is where my heart also cries for all the people that have died in aloneness. Like, this is one of the most cruel things we've been doing in humanity. Like, even a soldier that falls in the war, his co-soldier will stay with him. Like, this is one of the things that the army is trained to never leave a person dying. And so, yeah, but these are, I think we will have to own our story. We'll have to own the collective injustice. And we'll have to meet the traumas to get through this and to choose differently. And this is where I'm like so activist for, like, let's find out ways to meet the perpetrators when they are overpowering another human being, a child, a woman, a Black person, whoever that is. This violence is not okay. It's not. And how do we stop this? And this is where our attention should be.
Well, it seems like the attention is definitely shifting in that direction for sure as a result of everything that's happening right now. I guess the last thing I want to just get your wisdom on here is, I'm just sort of really obsessed with this group concept and groups of people supporting each other. Just from my own experience being in a men's group where there is a certain amount of trauma that's being dealt with from everyone in the group, low level trauma probably, in our weekly group. What I've come to find is that, when I'm working, obviously that's valuable for me. But I've also found a lot of value and self-introspection from hearing from other men and hearing their process and seeing them go through their own process. In some cases, it's really opened up, me starting to validate things maybe that I felt about myself that I wasn't sure whether it was real or not. And I guess I would just love to get your thoughts on, in the group dynamic and how particularly the group dynamic can be effective in helping us solve some of these issues.
Well, one of the most effective things is to be in a group where there is safety and clarity enough for us to be vulnerable, but also to learn about our forces, our strength. So just imagine 30 people being trained in how to give accurate feedback in a way that is for the other and not against. So then that is 30 people going out into the world, knowing how to give feedback in a way that is not creating war or attack, but it's opening into connection. So these things are so much easier to provide for in a group because we see each other and we learn from each other. Oh, so you can do it that way. Oh, so that's how we can do it. And just imagine, like, I had a man in a group, he had never held anyone before. And then he was asked to hold a person that felt very young, like very, very young, like 2 months old. And he said, well, I can't do it because I have never done it. And I said, okay, so this is how you do it. You sit, you hold, you breathe calmly. You don't take anything, you don't give anything, but you're constantly saying, I'm here, holding. And you know, this person, his heart just opened up like, wow, I can hold. I can contribute in the world with holding. Just like when our hearts in a group situation and then seeing other people holding and me asking them to look up from the child they're holding, look up and recognize and validate each other, you're actually holding humanity. And this is one of the most beautiful parts where we actually get to see we can do. It's possible. And we can collectively hold. And we can collectively surrender to bring our heart into connection and into compassion for humanity, not against. And that, there's nothing more beautiful than that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. So well said. And it's been such an honor to have you here to share your wisdom with our community. For people who are interested in finding out more about your work, your retreats, and kind of how you're showing up in the world for facilitating leadership and dealing with some of these issues, where's the best place to find out more about your work?
Well, there is, it's not very updated, but there is an avalondharma.com, Dharma, not drama. So avalondharma.com, and you also find me on Avalon Dharma Facebook. So and at the moment there is nothing I can do other than speak, because the work that I do and want to do is to be in close and connection in running groups. But if you're a leader or there are so many healthcare people, we have doctors, we have psychologists, like us who really are here to bring humanity forward into health, into joy, into aliveness. Yeah, that's there's no, you know, and there's one more thing I want to say, like we can grow very fast spiritually and high, but then most of us who does that in despite of what we were given, you know, how many people aren't psychologists or doctors because they needed that as small children, right? So, and then we often become intelligent and fire up and leaders and all of that, but we haven't worked on our own traumas, the parts of us that are afraid. And so in Avalon, we go down and we work on the fundament, and so that you become more solid in your service to the world. Get out of the helper role, get out of the roles that you have survived in, and to come back into authenticity and to lead from your own compassionate heart, and not having to carry the burden on your shoulder, but learn how to be informed, and with that information, use your power in the world.
Beautiful. Well, look, I think we're very much aligned in the change that we want to see. I acknowledge your leadership and work in the places that you found yourself up until now. And I know that you're just getting started too with the impact that you want to make in the world. And so I appreciate our opportunity to connect here. We'll have more details in the show notes about how to find out, connect. But in the meantime, thanks so much, everyone, for being here for the Rogue Health Economist podcast. This has been episode 24. Tomorrow, we're continuing Trauma Week with a conversation about adverse childhood events. And it's going to be really awesome with Nikki Gratrick. So thank you for being part of it. And we'll see you next time. Same place tomorrow.
Stay well. Ciao.